The cold night fell over the neighborhood, but inside the house I bought with the sweat of a lifetime. The temperature seemed even lower. Every corner of the spacious residence shone under lights I never learned to adjust, reflecting off designer furniture I was afraid to touch. For me, that place was never a home. It was Vanessa's stage, my daughter-in-law's, a meticulously assembled set where every object had its place, not to bring comfort, but to impress. The smell of expensive wax mingled with the aroma of the dinner I had spent the day preparing. But the silence in my rooms was profound, an emptiness that the sterile beauty did not fill. I saw everything as a spectator, aware that this was the perfect house for the drama of my life, a place where appearances were worth more than my soul. In the center of this frigid universe, I moved with the discretion of a shadow. At 62, I felt the weight of the day on my stooped shoulders, my gray hair, tied in a simple bun, and my modest dress, covered by an apron, contrasted with the surrounding luxury. As I served wine to the guests, a forced, fragile smile hid the melancholy in my eyes. I was the true owner of that house, the silent financier of that lifestyle. But my body and my gestures were those of a servant, moving with an efficiency that no one there seemed to notice. I just wanted the night to end, so I could retreat to my small room and pretend that the next day everything would be different. The climax of my humiliation came from where I least expected it, in the form of a kindness. One of the guests, a man with an easy smile, turned to Vanessa and asked in a friendly tone, "Vanessa, dear, and this nice lady who prepared everything with such care? The food is divine." Vanessa, stunning in her black dress, let out a short laugh, but her eyes did not smile. She raised her voice, making sure everyone could hear, and her tone, laden with disdain, sealed my fate that night. "Oh, don't worry about her," she said, waving her hand in my direction as if I were a nuisance. "She's just the maid." Her sentence hung in the air, sharper than any knife on that table. My world stopped. The sound of conversations, the ambient music, everything dissolved into a sharp hum. My forced smile froze and shattered. I looked at the table and saw my son, my Lucas, with his eyes lowered, studying his own plate as if it were the most interesting thing in the world. He did not defend me. In that instant, the crushing pain of ingratitude was stronger than my mother's love. I felt no urge to cry. I felt a frightening calm wash over me. The woman who lived to please died right there, and in her place, another was born, forged in humiliation, with an unshakable decision in her heart. If this story has already touched your heart, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the unfolding and comment from which city or country you are watching us. We want to know how far these emotions reach. I am writing Block 2. Act 2. Context and Development. When I retreated to the kitchen, the calm that enveloped me was an armor. The noise of the party became a distant hum, an echo of a world that was no longer mine. My hands, which once trembled while serving, were now steady as I washed the last dish with methodical precision. I did not shed a single tear. They had dried up long ago, replaced by a clarity that hurt, but also liberated. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, superimposed on the garden I had planted, and I saw a stranger. In that instant, I made my decision. I took off the apron Vanessa had given me as a gift, folded it carefully, and left it on the imported marble countertop. Symbolically, I was resigning from the role that had been imposed on me. My service there was over. I waited until the last guest had left. I heard Vanessa throw herself on the sofa, her voice exultant over the success of the night. That's when I approached. My posture, once stooped, was now erect. The resignation on my face had given way to a serenity that disarmed them. I held out my hand, and in my palm, the house keys gleamed. Vanessa looked at me with contempt. "What is this? Are you going to bed already? Don't forget to take out the trash." I kept my gaze fixed on hers, my voice coming out firmer than I ever imagined possible. "If I am the maid," I said, savoring the irony, "my services are no longer required. The house is yours to take care of now. Good luck with the 6,000 real." Mortgage payment due on Friday. That house was the materialization of my love and my grief. Years ago, when my Roberto passed away, I was left with $800,000 from his life insurance. It was all we had. I could have lived a quiet old age, but my mother's heart ached seeing Lucas, my only son, struggling to start his life. I used almost every penny to buy and furnish that place, a nest I believed would be safe for him. I put the deed in my name for security, but I gave it to him as the greatest gift I could offer. It was meant to be a sanctuary of family love, a place where he could build his own dreams, not the gilded cage it became, sustained by my dignity. Vanessa's arrival changed the melody of the house. In the beginning, she was all smiles and hugs. Gradually, however, the poison began to drip. There were suggestions about my simple way of dressing, disguised criticisms of my unsophisticated food. She subtly taught my son to be ashamed of me, of his roots, of the honest life his father and I had led. The house, which I had dreamed of full of laughter and grandchildren, became a showroom for the luxury life she sold online. And I, the matriarch, the rock upon which everything was built, was slowly demoted to the role of an invisible employee, a walking reminder of a humility she wanted to erase. I remember the pain of watching Lucas give in. He loved me, I knew, but he was bewitched by the false glitter of the life Vanessa promised him. The clearest memory is of a Sunday afternoon. I was making my cornmeal cake, my mother's recipe, which he loved so much. Vanessa came into the kitchen and said that cake was too poor to serve to her friends. I saw the hesitation in my son's eyes, the conflict between the two of us. And then he asked me in a low voice to put the cake away. "Save it for another day, Mom." He chose image over affection. That small act of cowardice was the first of many, and each one opened a crack in my heart. That night, after handing over the keys, I didn't look back. I went upstairs, grabbed a small bag with some clothes, a book, and the yellowed photo of my Roberto. It was the only thing of real value I had there. I went down and walked out the front door, the door of my own house, feeling the cold night air on my face like a baptism. I didn't go to any relative's house to avoid having to explain. I took a taxi and asked to be taken to a simple hotel in the city center. It was an anonymous, impersonal place. It was the perfect place for my rebirth. Guilt weighed on me, but for the first time in years, I tasted freedom. The next morning, I imagined the scene. Lucas and Vanessa waking up, perhaps annoyed by my drama. The surprise at finding my room empty. The real panic, however, must have started in the kitchen, where I left, next to my folded apron, the folder with all the bills, electricity, water, the luxury condominium fee, and, highlighted, the mortgage payment book in my name with the installment. Due in 3 days. I could almost hear the heavy silence being broken by her screams of despair and his confusion. Reality, harsh and cold, would knock on their door long before the bailiff. My phone rang at noon. It was Lucas. My heart pounded, a mixture of hope and fear. I answered. His voice went from disbelief to anger, and finally, to a pleading tone that cut me to the soul. "Mom, what have you done? Where are you? How could you do this to us?" I took a deep breath, searching for the strength I had found the night before. "I did what needed to be done, my son. For me," I answered with a calm I didn't know I possessed. "You are adults. The house is yours now, as are the responsibilities." He fell silent, shocked. For the first time, I did not give in. Lucas told me later that Vanessa's reaction was exactly what I had expected. She showed no remorse, only fury. To her, the fault was all mine. I was the toxic one, the dramatic one, the abusive mother-in-law. A few days later, I saw vague posts on her social media about the importance of cutting ties with family members who don't respect your space, turning her ingratitude into a self-help narrative for her followers. She painted herself as the victim, the warrior fighting against negativity. The hypocrisy was so great that instead of pain, I felt a kind of pity. She was so lost in her own theater that she couldn't see reality. The financial pressure was not long in coming. A week later, Lucas called me. Again. His voice was tense, worn out. The bank had called. He mentioned the notification, and I could hear Vanessa's shrill voice in the background, accusing him. Their house of cards was collapsing, and I realized that the pillar supporting it was not their love or success, but my silence and my money. I felt a deep sadness to see my son in that situation, but at the same time, a somber certainty that this was the only way for him to one day find himself again and become the man I knew he could be. Meanwhile, I was living my new reality. The hotel room was small, but it was my sanctuary. In the first few days, loneliness was a physical presence, and guilt visited me in the early hours. Did I abandon my son? Am I a horrible mother? I would ask myself. Then, one day I looked at myself in the simple bathroom mirror and didn't see the maid. I didn't see Lucas's mom. I saw Helena. Just Helena. A woman with a story, with pains, but also with a strength that had been dormant. Recognizing my own name, my own being, was both frightening and incredibly powerful. To strengthen my spirit, I called Clara, my oldest friend, a fellow teacher with whom I had shared more than 30 years of my profession. I told her everything, unfiltered, my voice choked with emotion. She listened to me in silence and, at the end, said with the firmness I needed to hear, "Helena, you didn't abandon him. You invited him to grow. And most importantly, after a lifetime of giving yourself, you finally chose yourself." Those words were the balm my soul needed. The anguish gave way to a serene determination. The question was no longer whether I would go back to them, but what I, Helena, would do with the rest of my life. Weeks of tense silence passed, broken only by sporadic and desperate calls from Lucas. I held firm, despite the pain I felt each time I heard his anguished voice. The turning point, he told me later, didn't come from the bank's pressure, but from a sentence he overheard. By chance. He came home early and heard Vanessa talking on the phone with a friend, her voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't worry, friend. It's just a matter of time. As soon as the old woman gives in and starts paying the bills again, we'll put her in a nursing home far away from here and the problem will be over." My son described how his world fell apart in that second. The woman he loved, the life he defended, all revealed to be a monstrous farce, built on a cruel plan to discard me. The confrontation was immediate and devastating. For the first time, Lucas did not remain silent. He told me he looked at her, at the expensive furniture, at the walls of the house I bought, and felt disgust. Every luxury item seemed to scream the truth about her character. The argument, according to him, had no shouting, but a tone of contempt and disappointment that was much worse. He called her what she was, an empty, materialistic, and cruel person. He saw that their marriage was not a partnership, but a business in which his mother was the asset to be exploited and then liquidated. That same night, he packed a bag, not with the designer clothes she had bought, but with the old things he had before her. He left behind the house, and more importantly, the illusion. A few days later, the doorbell of my new small rented apartment rang. When I opened the door, I saw my son. He looked years older. He was thinner, with deep dark circles under his eyes, but there was a different light in his gaze, a clarity I hadn't seen since he was a boy. He looked inside my modest home, with the simple second-hand furniture I had bought, and his eyes filled with tears. I invited him in, my mother's heart breaking to see him suffer, but at the same time feeling immense relief to have him back. Not Vanessa's son, but my Lucas. He was broken, but he was finally free, and on his face, I saw the beginning of the man he should have become. He couldn't speak for a long time. He just cried, a silent, pained cry of someone who has lost everything but found what is essential. When he finally lifted his face, shame and regret were stamped there. "Mom, I'm so sorry," he whispered. His voice choked. "I was blind and weak. I let luxury and ambition turn me into an ungrateful son, a monster. You weren't the maid, Mom. You were the pillar that held everything up, and I stood by while she tried to tear you down. Please, please forgive me." Each of his words was a knife in my chest, but also the cure for a wound I thought would never close. The tears I had held back for so long finally came, but they were not of pain. They were of relief, of catharsis. I stood up, went to him, and hugged him with all the strength I had. I felt his shoulders tremble in my arms, and in that embrace, years of distance and hurt dissolved. I pulled his face away to look him in the eyes. "I forgive you, my son. I forgive you," I said, feeling a gigantic weight lift from my back. I took a deep breath and added, with the firmness that life had taught me, "But for our love to survive, it needs respect. Things can never be as they were before. From today on, we build something new, together, but on the rock of truth and dignity." Are you enjoying this story? Leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Now we continue with the video. My decision to forgive Lucas did not mean a return to the past. On the contrary, it meant his definitive liberation from it. The first and most important step was to sell the house. For me, that property was no longer a home or an investment. It was a mausoleum of painful memories, a monument to my humiliation. Lucas understood and supported the decision. When I signed the sales papers, transferring the property to a new family that I hoped would fill it with genuine laughter, I didn't feel a hint of regret. I felt as if I were signing my own Declaration of Independence. The money, the fruit of a lifetime of work by me and my late husband, was back in my hands, and this time, I would use it with the wisdom that pain had taught me. With the proceeds from the sale, I planned a new future for both of us, a future based on responsibility, not dependency. First, I bought myself a comfortable apartment with a sunny balcony where I could tend to my plants, a place that was unequivocally mine. With the rest, I helped Lucas. But I didn't just hand him the money. I offered him the down payment for a simple apartment in a working-class neighborhood. With a mortgage payment I knew he could afford with his own salary. It wasn't a gift that would make him comfortable, but a tool that would propel him forward. I was no longer building a nest for him. I was giving him the materials to build his own. The change in Lucas was the greatest reward I could have received. He officially separated from Vanessa and, with a humility that filled me with pride, began to rebuild his life from scratch. He got a job at a small logistics company, an honest job, without the glamour that once blinded him. He began to value every cent he earned and to find satisfaction in his own achievements, no matter how small. Our relationship flourished on this new foundation. He would call me not to ask for things, but to share his victories. Our conversations became bridges of affection and mutual respect, and I finally had my son back, stronger and more whole than ever. Today, I understand that true love cannot exist without respect as its oxygen. I learned in the hardest way that setting boundaries is not an act of abandonment or selfishness, but a testament to self-love and an invitation for the other to mature and find their own worth. My journey was painful, but it gave me back my dignity and taught me that a person's value is not in what they can offer materially, but in the respect they deserve and, above all, the respect they demand for themselves. The wealth I sought for my son was not in a big house, but in the strength of his character. Have you done a gesture of kindness that changed a life? Leave a little heart if you believe that love is more powerful than any wealth. Subscribe for more stories of second chances. Comment, "Love has no price," if you also believe in human kindness. Epilogue. 2 years later, life has found a sweet and serene rhythm. My apartment smells like cornmeal cake every Sunday. I have opened my doors and my heart to give free tutoring to the neighborhood children, and the sound of their laughter fills the void that once haunted me. Lucas always arrives at lunchtime. He seems more mature, his face more serene, and his smile easy. He tells me proudly about the small promotion he got at work, a recognition of his own effort. We talk and laugh with the intimacy and affection of a family that was lost in a storm and found each other in the calm. Seeing him there, happy with his simple and honest life, I know that by selling that house, I did not lose an asset. I saved a much greater treasure, My son,